Hi and welcome to another Retro Sheep review. This time it's Overlander on the Amstrad CPC 464. Now the man who wrote this, Mr. Mark Haigh-Hutchinson, he sadly passed away in 2008, so I thought I'd start the video off with just a little bit of info about him. And as far as I can make out, he started doing work on the Spectrum, but was hired in 1987 by Elite Systems so that he could port Paperboy over to the Amstrad, and this was a task that he did pretty much single-handedly. Although, I don't know, reports due to memory limits or tight budgets or deadlines or whatever, the game famously had no sound on it. But people still liked it, and it sold fairly well. So moving on from this then, in 1988 we're going to see the feature of this video, the game Overlander, which again he wrote pretty much single-handedly. And but arguably got his big break in 1989 when he was hired by LucasArts, the gaming wing of George Lucas's big empire. And that meant that in the 1990s he worked quite a lot on the Star Wars franchise, so did a lot of work on things like Rebel Assault and Episode 1 Racer. And there was one of my personal favourites, a game released in 1995 called Dark Forces, which was a first-person shooter, and I absolutely loved this to bits at the time and played it over and over again. And as you can see, we've moved on to CDs by this time. And the good old DOS prompt there. Yep, so there's the LucasArts logo, as it was in the mid-90s. And a very long credits reel. List of names getting ever longer on the number of people it takes to make one of these sorts of games. So we'll do a sort of Spaceball style fast forward here. Lord Helmet gets a copy of Spaceballs the movie and skips through it. And so heading further down, there's the man himself, additional programming, Mark Haigh-Hutchinson. So the closest rivals to this were probably things like Doom, and I think this was about the time of Duke Nukem as well. I seem to recall playing a game called Strife as well, which wasn't as good as this, but it was still good for a blast. And I think also there were things like Hexen and Witchhaven. I think Quake was a little bit later than this. That came out about 1996 to 97 or thereabouts. And original Star Wars music, John Williams, and the man himself, George Lucas. So that's a very, very prestigious credits reel for Mark Haigh-Hutchinson to get his name on. Something to be very proud of. So then, on to Overlander, and there's your cassette box. Amstrad 464, 664, 6128. And, released on the Encore label. And it promises us fast, furious driving action. And I think probably of those four words, the middle two are probably the most accurate. But for $2.99, what do you expect? It'll certainly make you furious, I can tell you. There's your cassette tape. 1988, Elite Systems Limited. A lot of tape inside that cassette. I think this took about 16 or possibly 17 minutes to load, so not the longest ever, but still quite a load. And there's your Commodore versions as well, Spectrum screenshots. And further down, there's the Amstrad. And this is the first game, apparently, to enable you to climb hills and drive down into valleys. So I suppose that means the road sort of just moves up and down a bit. And there's your blurb about the story. Basically, the ozone layer of the Earth has been stripped away, and now you are an overlander and you're running cargo across the surface of the planet. So it also got, Amiga and Atari ST releases as well. So we'll have a quick look at the game at its sort of high watermark. This is the A500 version. So a nice bit of artwork there. And we'll be following the same formula when we get onto the Amstrads. It'll be fill up your car with fuel and tool up as best as you can. And so that's what it looks like on the Amiga. The post-apocalyptic world, barren desert, but with a racetrack running through it. Devil Straits, the name of the first level. It's a bit more obvious in the Amstrad version. And lots of nice explosions, very smooth, nice gun sounds. And one thing we won't be able to do when we get to the Amstrad version is this. We won't be able to go straight through these gun turrets. We won't be able to blaze a trail through the middle. They will pick us off if we try and do that, so we'll be going a lot more slowly. And there's one of our specials in action. That's one of our flamethrowers. Spectacular. A bit like a bit of carpet bombing. And these motorcycles are going to be a pain in the backside for us on the first level. Not quite as much of a problem in this Amiga version, because they do at least sort of stay away from you, but in the Amstrad version they really do sort of just home in on you. And as we'll see in a minute, that is a bit of a problem, because like that one on the left there, you crash into that, and you're destroyed. You lose a life. So that is going to be possibly one of the biggest headaches of the game when we get started. So that's the Amiga version. That sort of represents the high watermark for this game. So we'll now move on to the Amstrad version, 1988, so 30 years ago. And there it is, written by Mark haigh-hutchinson, 1988 Elite Systems Limited. And there aren't too many options in this game. All you can do basically is choose your control method, keyboard, joystick, or redefine your keys. The other name there on the credits, Gary Tong. Now, he is also credited with additional graphics in one of my favourite games on the Amiga 500, Bart vs. the Space Mutants, in 1991. There it is. This game was bundled with... we had the Cartoon Classics version of the Amiga 500, so this came along with things like Lemmings as well, so it was quite a good bundle to get, really. We had a lot of fun with these games. And I think Gary Tong is still going strong today as well. He was the concept art director for the Formula 1 games that Codemasters has been releasing in recent years. I think he was doing that between about 2010 and 2012. And so he's still around and still working. So a quick rundown of the display there. In the bottom left you've got basically all the weapons that you can buy. From top to bottom you've got flamethrowers, missiles and smart bombs. There doesn't seem to be a great deal of difference between flamethrowers and missiles, and yet to really find the difference between them. The main difference is that one of them costs $100 and the other one costs $1,000, so the cheaper option's probably best. You can fire those at your enemies and basically you will destroy them, so they're very powerful. Smart bombs are even better, but they're also very expensive. Detonate one of those and all on-screen enemies will be destroyed, so use them sparingly. In the bottom right of the screen there, you've got, from top to bottom, you've got the number of lives that you've got left, number of bulletproofings, and the number of battering rams. Bulletproofings, basically, instead of losing a life, if you get hit, you'll lose a bulletproofing, so they're quite useful. And battering rams can be used to basically bulldoze your way through barriers, which will start appearing from level 2 onwards. So we'll get the game going, and you've got a choice of cargo. Now, it doesn't matter who you actually work for, whether it's the Federation or the Crime Lords, but the value of the cargo is critical. Basically, the more valuable the cargo, the more likely you are to be targeted by people who wish to intercept it. So basically, it's a way of saying this is an easy level or a hard level, and we're going to be cowards and take the easy level. You get half your money up front. So we've got $4,500 to spend on tooling up our car. We're going to spend a third of that on fuel, which leaves us $3,000 to basically try and soup this car up a bit. So really, ideally, what we want is armour plating, but that's $10,000. You can never get that in the first level, which is a shame, because it means those motorcyclists that we saw earlier are now going to be an absolute pain in the backside. So instead we'll probably buy a few flamethrowers because they're nice and cheap, and possibly 1 or 2 bulletproofings as well. And why not have a battering ram? Yeah, I'll have a few of those. Yeah, and once you've bought a certain category of weapon as well, the others are frozen out. You can't have more than one type of weapon at any one time. And another bulletproofing, I think. Yeah. So now we're finished, we can get started. So for level number 1, Devil's Straight. A bit more easy to spot that in the Amstrad version than the Amiga version. And away we go. Remember, we will build fast, furious driving action. So here we go. So yeah, it's a bit slow. Only 4 colours on screen. But at least the car handles reasonably well. And we're going up one of our first hills there. Road weaving up and down. We're climbing hills and driving down into valleys. Try and shoot as many of these cars as you can. Each one you destroy gets you $100, as you can see in the top centre of the screen. And the more money you have at the end of the level, the more stuff you can buy for the next level. And the first of these pesky motorcyclists, because basically they just sort of they wander around the road and they home in on you, and it's really difficult sometimes to shoot them, and they just crash into you and you lose lives so cheaply. In fact, it's for that reason, I must confess at this point, that I think I took about half a dozen snapshots to get through this level number one, because it is so difficult to actually do this without losing a life. And if you're trying to do a play and review and you want to show it without losing a life, it can be very difficult to just go through level 1 without getting hit by one of these things at some point. And that's why we're going slowly at the moment as well. Those arrows in the bottom left of the screen there, as you may have worked out, they basically... Oh, hang on, I'll get back to that now. We've got the gun turrets, so we can't blast our way through the middle of these or we will get picked off. So we slow right down and we pick them all off one by one. And that gets us another $100 each time as well. What I was going to say about those arrows is that, as you probably noticed, if they colour blue, either the up arrow or the down arrow, that basically tells you if you've got an enemy in front of you or behind you. So it's not especially useful in this game, but it does just sort of show what's happening. More cars, hopefully, that we can destroy. Notice how we're bouncing off these cars at the moment. If we can fit wheel blades to our car in future levels, then it won't be us that bounces off them. We will remain perfectly still. We'll be able to shuffle them across the road and into these overturned cars. Crash into one of those overturned cars and you lose a life, by the way. Now I'm just going to demonstrate what happens with these motorcyclists. I'm going to duck briefly out and show you what can happen and why it is so annoying. You can be just simply driving along, minding your own business, and then all of a sudden they appear out of nowhere, they crash into you, and you lose a life. It is so frustrating. So again, that is why I have taken snapshots on this level 1. Right, another type of enemy now, and he's just sucked both our bulletproofings off us. They can be very dangerous, those cars. Really, the best thing to do is to try and get in quickly with your special and destroy them before they have a chance to shoot you, like that. But you can lose so many bulletproofings so quickly to those, so it's very difficult. And sometimes in later levels, if you haven't got specials, the only thing you can do is slow your car right down and just let them drive off into the distance. Because you will not be able to beat them. If you use your normal gun, and you've got unlimited shots for that, but it's very weak, you know, it takes about 3 or 4 hits sometimes to destroy them. And you've got to line up behind them to do that, and if you do that, you get picked off. So you've got to be selective with how you get those. But if you can destroy one of those big cars, you do get $1,000 a time, so it's quite a big prize if you can do that. Notice when we're driving up and down into these valleys, the cars, if they go above the horizon, they actually colour the colour of the sky, so the sprites aren't sort of being coloured individually, they're just sort of, whether they're above, yeah, there we are, whether they're above that line or below that line, they're changing colour, so we can drive up and down into valleys, but the colouring isn't quite right. And more of these motorcycles. Absolute pain these are. We'll get our revenge though in later levels. Yeah, so if this is fast, furious driving action, I think probably the word furious is probably the most accurate at the moment, because it can be very difficult. Notice as well how we're getting a bit low on fuel now. You have absolutely no clue as to how much fuel to put in your car for each level. And at the end of each level, if you have any surplus fuel, you don't get to carry that over to the next level either. So, you know, if you fill up too full on fuel, you've basically wasted a lot of money. But on the other hand, if you're a bit skinny on the fuel and you can't quite complete the level, then you don't just lose a life, you are out of the game. That is it, game over. So it's a little bit annoying in that respect. And it's not a case of, I mean, we're running a bit low on fuel now, but if you slow down, it doesn't conserve fuel. That fuel bar is more like a timer for the level. So, really, you want to go as fast as you can. And more gun turrets to pick off. Yeah, so doing this now, going down to 5 mile an hour, 20 mile an hour, that doesn't save any fuel at all. So we're trying to pick these turrets off quickly before we run out of fuel. Just avoid that car there. Crash into an overturned car and you lose a life. The car seems to be stuck to my bumper. Right, that's better. Yeah, so there we go. We got our shot in quickly there before that that big vehicle had a chance to shoot at us. Although we've run out of specials now, so if we get any more of those, we may have to just slow down a bit, or we may have to bludgeon our way through here because we're very low on fuel. Another $1,000 for the kitty. We're down to our last pixel of fuel now, so I think this is the end now. Every level seems to finish with a reasonably long straight at the end, so that's it, and we're going to make it just in time. That's a bit skinny on the fuel actually, really. You want to have a bit more of a safer buffer zone than that. End of level. So we get the other half of our money there now, $4,500. So we've got a reasonable amount now to spend on the next level. So now the cargo values go up a bit. Again, it doesn't matter who you work for, but the value of the cargo will determine the difficulty of the level. So this time I think we'll go for the biggie. And notice that price per unit of fuel is now $200, not $100. So, well, I know inflation is bad, but well, So the absolute thing we definitely want here is armour plating, because that will neutralise all those motorcyclists. They won't be able to do anything to us now for the rest of the game. So now again it's going to be a case of get some weapons and get some rams or something like that. So just to demonstrate the missiles, we'll get a few of those this time. But I really can't see much difference between them and flamethrowers, except the price, of course. We're not going to get the turbocharger because even though it does help with the acceleration, it's sort of... you lose control over your car a bit. It makes it more difficult to brake and to just sort of gently work your way around the track if you're trying to pick off turrets and things like that. You sort of lose control a bit. So level 2, Snake Canyon. We've got a change in the colours, still only 4 colours. Although they've been quite clever there with the fuel bar to try and make it look as though there are more colours there. They've sort of weaved in the yellow and the blue to create a sort of paler shade of blue, and the red and the yellow to create a paler shade of red. So that's pretty clever. It's amazing now that we've actually got armour plating, none of these motorcyclists want to crash into us anymore. So there's the appearance of the barriers. So try and pick your way through these. If you do happen to hit one, you will lose a battering ram. And if you have no battering rams, you'll lose a life. So we're still bouncing off that cargo. We'll try and get wheel blades for the next level. That'll help us out a bit. So now these motorcyclists, they're absolutely no problem at all. Just crash into them if you want, run them over. They cannot touch us anymore. Notice that square as well in the bottom of the screen, the sort of the letter A there has now been coloured blue. That's basically because we've bought armour plating. And the other squares will fill in as well if we buy some of the other stuff as well. I think that might be the turbocharger next to that, and then further along maybe the lean burner, and then the wheel blades I think sort of centre right there. More gun turrets. So basically, yeah, there are only about 5 enemies, I think, in this game. You've got those cars which sort of come up from behind us and wander around a bit. You've got the motorcyclists, you've got these gun turrets, you've got the sort of the cars that come from in front of you and shoot back at you. And then you've got just the obstacles in the road, like those barriers we just passed. And that is about everything. So it's 5 levels of this basically, but they do get more difficult each time. But as each level goes on, you're able to get a lot more money, so you can basically soup your car up a lot better. So it's one of those games where I think probably the first level is one of the most difficult, and if you can get past that and get your armour plating, then you should be able to work your way, just pick your way through the rest of the game. So I think that's everything explained now. I'm not going to talk for the rest of the video, but I will be back with a few comments and a review score at the end. Okay, we're nearly at the end of the game now, as you've probably noticed. Just got a couple more cars to get past. Noticing as well that I'm slowing down quite a lot, because I've run out of specials, so I don't think this car is a match for them, so we'll just take it nice and easy. You've seen the turbocharger in action now as well, and that's a part I don't usually like to buy for the car because you've got to launch yourself up to top speed before you can slow down again. It's a very difficult thing to control, and if you are trying to, say, creep past the gun turrets, that's not really what you want to be happening. So here we are, we're on the home stretch now, and when we reach the end of this in just a few seconds, we'll have our game completed message and a little bit of different music. Congratulations, you're a true Overlander. And that's it, just straight back to the main menu. No high score table, nowhere for you to put your name into the high score table. Your score is kept in memory though, so if you play another game it'll be in the top right hand corner of the screen. So we'll just have a look now at one or two of the interesting points of the video. This is basically what happens if you try and take these cars on. Now I'm shooting at this thing, but am I getting any hits? I don't know. I know I'm not hitting it every single time, but surely something is hitting here. He's certainly hitting me. Anyway, this will be the ultimate game over, if you lose all your lives. And then there's also the way the game can end is if you run out of fuel. Now notice we've got 5 lives left, but that's game over. Quite curious really when you think about it. Your car explodes and you're smashed into smithereens and you lose a life, but if you just run out of fuel that's the end of the game. So there we have it. So then just another point about how quickly you can lose your bulletproofings. We have 9 here to start with, and we're coming up against one of these cars. We're trying desperately to hit it. And 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and 2. It's taken 7 of our bulletproofings, although the collision detection is a bit dubious in places. Watch this one. Interesting. So that's Overlander, and well, with this year being 2018, this was released in 1988, so that's 30 years ago. So to the all-important review score. So, well, what can you say about it? It's a very average game, really. Nothing wrong with the concept at all. The idea of buying your weapons and things and racing over 5 levels is a very good idea. It's a nice little sort of on-screen display there with all your weapons and things laid out, but basically the main problem with this game is that it does suffer from very slow gameplay and there are very limited colours. So, you know, fast, furious driving action's probably a bit of an overstatement. Having said that though, it's certainly not the worst game out there, so in the end I've sort of come down to sort of middle of the road sort of score, 61 out of 100. So that's Overlander on the Amstrad. Thank you for watching the video, hope you enjoyed it, and all the best.